Since you started making such wines, how do you feel your winemaking has evolved? What have you learned over those 5 years?
Um, what have I learned? I think I'm certainly always learning. There's always some new learning that comes from each vintage. Um, I've learned not to trust too much in terms of what textbooks or what other people might say
Right.
works or doesn't work. Um, to trust a bit more my gut instinct, but also I think what I find still quite hard, and it's still it's still quite interesting, is that making wines with no additions tends to have this image, rightly and wrongly, of people who tend to be relatively slapdash about what they're doing. Whereas the majority of producers that I know are not like that at all. And yeah, I think we spend a lot of our time worrying, and that's the main takeaway from what I do, is that I certainly, it would be so much easier if we just added some sulfur,
Yeah.
and you could walk away from the tank and you'd be safe. Whereas you have to you have to frequently go back and check, make sure everything's okay, keep an eye on it, look after it, nurture it through, and that's still something I am not learning or coming to terms with, but sort of just grappling with, I think.
Yes. In speaking with a number of other producers who have dabbled in the orange amber skinsy world, what many of them have told me, they've said it's taken them a few years to come around to where they feel comfortable with the sweet spot for that maceration, for the types of wines they're trying to make, whether it's something for early drinking or something a little bit more for the long term. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'd really like to have a ferment in which we basically keep the wine on skins for as long as possible. In other words, 12 plus months. Now, the majority of what we do produce is pressed off relatively early. We generally have a maceration time of about 2 weeks or thereabouts. It varies. We normally press off when it smells and tastes really good.
Yeah.
It's generally a good indicator of where you're at. I've also found that even just a little bit past that is totally fine. It's a relatively robust form of making wine. I know anecdotally that trying to do a halfway house is potentially not so good, in that if you try and sort of leave it on skins for, say, I don't know, 3 months or something like that and go, okay, we'll take it off. Anecdotally, I've heard that's not great, but I don't know. I'd like to see it and how it goes. I'd like to have at least one vat where we can just chart the progress. And what I understand is that after, say, I don't know, 9 to 12 months, the phenolics and the texture and everything comes round and it tastes fine. But I haven't any direct experience of that. What I've tasted from, say, Italy and places like that would suggest that that's 100% what happens. But yeah, in terms of personal experience, no.
Now, in parallel to your evolution as a winemaker, making these orange skin contact wines, there has been quite the trend in New Zealand, both for the consumption and for the making of these wines. From your personal experience, how have you witnessed all of that happening? And where are orange wines on the radar for most wine drinkers in New Zealand today?
I think it remains of, I don't want to say minority interest, but it's perhaps not as big as it could be.
Right.
Certainly not in Europe. New Zealand tends to lag in terms of international tastes, generally behind what's going on in, say, Europe or North America. So it is not necessarily minority, but it's a sort of, production tends to be relatively small in New Zealand terms, and the interest in it certainly it's quite easy to get caught up in the wine world in
Yeah.
which you say, oh yeah, heaps of people are drinking these wines. But actually, if I, in other walks of life where I come across other people, they're not aware of even the natural wine thing is still, relatively unknown in New Zealand in general terms. We started out pretty much, I won't say at the beginning of it, because there were people doing what we were doing before us, like Hermit Ram, which is Theo, and others. But we're sort of, I suppose you'd say we're within that group of people doing the natural thing. Although, yeah, that dates back to about 5+ years, I would say.
When it comes to the New Zealand scene, who inspired you when it comes to this style of winemaking?
Well, no one really. I mean, like I said, we sort of wanted to do these kind of wines just as and when things were kicking off. So there was no real reference point. The people that started doing it as we were doing it, or who had a few years advance on us, would be someone like Theo Coles, who's at Hermit Ram, doing skin contact Sauvignon and things like that. I'm trying to think of other people who might have done it, but
Sam Millton has been doing it for quite some time, right?
Yeah, Sam, absolutely. Sorry, yes, sorry. Apologies to Sam.
I'm sure he wouldn't mind. He's a lovely guy.
Yeah. So no, absolutely, Libbiamo and things like that. Which, that's also one of the wonderful things that I managed to taste, was that sort of Gewürz, it's actually Muscat and Gewürz, skin fermented as well, which was fantastic. Sorry, thank you for prompting me on the Milton thing. That was that's taken me back.
Well, of course, those are two great varieties that you have a soft spot for as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And as soon as someone said, "Oh, this is what this is," and I was like, "This is just great."
So where do you see the whole scene going in the next decade? Where would you like to see the New Zealand orange amber skinsy scene?
This isn't the first time I've been asked this, and this was asked me in a different way about a year or two ago, I think. This year I did. Where I would like to see it going, I think I'd like to see more people doing it. I'd like to see more. I think more established names doing it, but a lot of them already are, and that's what's interesting now, is that there's a slight shift in winemaking here, in which people are doing or experimenting more with maceration. So things like Riesling being macerated by depressing. It's nothing new. It's well known in Germany and Alsace, things like that. But more maceration on white grapes. And if you look, I don't know, Atarangi would be one. They have a portion of their Sauvignon Blanc which is skin fermented, and that forms a small component, not a major component, but a small component of their blend. And I think people are waking up to the fact that you can get more aromatic and textural interest from skin fermenting white wines. So I'd like to see more just standard producers doing it, which would be nice. And I don't know, I think it will just gently grow. I mean, New Zealand is so focused on sort of commercial Sauvignon Blanc that it's very, so you're always talking about what's happening in that sort of 30% margin of the entire country's production, which, within that 30%, a lot of it is Pinot Noir. So again, you're sort of always talking about diminishing fractions. So it's relatively niche. But I'd just like to see more of it. I'd like to see more producers doing it.
Super. Well, we would like to see more of your wine over here in Canada. Do you currently export over to Ontario?
Not that I'm aware of. No. We do export to the United States through Wine Dogs, but not to Canada. Yeah. Our production is quite small, though. We're
so I've heard.
We're going gently.
Well, hopefully we'll see you at some point up in Ontario. Thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution. Really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful, you're on to Wednesday now. Have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.
Take care. Bye for now.